A human prince stood beside the princess, defying every ancient law. Streets were alive with movement, alien merchants calling out their wares in strange languages, and machines gliding silently over the polished stone. It was a place of great beauty, but also of strict rules, rules that had held the empire together for thousands of cycles. Among these rules was one that no human could ever forget. Humans were inferior, and no human could ever stand beside a Zythurian princess. Prince Kale of Earth had known of this rule long before he arrived. He had been briefed countless times by diplomats, military advisors, and even historians who warned him that stepping into the Zythurian royal court was a dangerous act for a human. Yet here he stood, his human form seemingly small against the towering Zythurians in their ceremonial robes, but his eyes steady, his heart pounding with resolve. He was not just a visitor, he had a purpose, and that purpose required courage that even he sometimes doubted he possessed. The grand doors of the palace opened before him with a deep, resonant hum, revealing the council chamber beyond. The walls glimmered with embedded crystals that reflected the sun's light, creating shifting patterns across the floor. Kale stepped in, careful not to stumble, his gaze drawn immediately to the figure at the center of the room. Princess Lyra stood with an elegance that could silence a room, her posture regal, her expression unreadable. She was young, but her presence carried authority far beyond her years. Every Zythurian in the chamber looked to her as a guide, a leader, and a symbol of the Empire's glory. Kale knew the laws. He knew the moment he moved closer to her, every eye in the room would turn, every whisper would spread, and every ancient rule would be remembered. But he also knew something else. He could not leave without making a stand, no matter the cost. Humans had long been underestimated, dismissed as weak, incapable of understanding the vast complexities of the Empire. But Kale carried something invisible yet powerful, a courage born of necessity, a belief that humanity had a place among the stars. The moment he stepped into her view, Princess Lyra's eyes met his. There was no fear, no hesitation, only curiosity. He had expected shock, anger, or even disgust, but instead, he found a spark of recognition in her gaze, as if she understood something he himself was only beginning to realize. Kale felt a strange calm settle over him, a quiet confidence that allowed him to stand a little taller. "Prince Kale," Lyra said, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber. It was clear, measured, yet warm. "You have come far from your world to stand here. Do you understand what you risk?" "I do, Your Highness," Kale replied, his voice steady despite the rapid beating of his heart. "I know the laws forbid humans to be here, and I know the consequences, but I also know that some laws are meant to be questioned." A murmur ran through the chamber. The council members exchanged glances, their expressions ranging from disbelief to outrage. Humans were not supposed to speak like this, let alone challenge the authority of a Zythurian princess. Some of the older members of the council shook their heads, muttering words of warning and recalling ancient precedents of punishment. Yet Kale did not falter. Lyra's eyes softened, and a faint smile touched her lips. She took a step closer to him, unafraid, and in that moment the room seemed to hold its breath. By standing beside her, Kale was breaking a law older than any living Zythurian. And yet, in defying it, he also showed the courage and integrity that no Zythurian could claim so easily. "You are brave, Prince Kale," Lyra said quietly, almost to herself. Then she addressed the council. "And perhaps it is time for us to consider that bravery alone is not a threat. Perhaps it is a gift." The council erupted in objections, voices clashing in a storm of tradition and fear. "Your Highness, this is unacceptable. You cannot allow a human to stand beside you." The laws exist to serve the Empire, not to bind it in fear," Lyra interrupted, her tone sharp, commanding. "We have prospered for centuries by following these laws, yes, but we have also suffered because we have never questioned them. If we continue to rule only by fear of punishment, we will stagnate. If we cannot see value in someone because of their species, we will fail to grow." Kale's heart raced, but he kept his composure. He had trained for diplomacy for moments like this, and he knew that words alone could win hearts, even when laws and traditions were stacked against him. "Your Highness," he said, bowing slightly, "humans are not perfect, but we are resilient. We learn, we adapt, and we create. If given the chance, I promise that humanity can serve this empire with honor and loyalty, not as subjects, but as equals." The murmurs grew louder, and some council members shifted uneasily. Never before had a human dared speak with such confidence, much less directly to the princess. The air was thick with tension, yet in the midst of it, a new energy began to stir, a curiosity that had lain dormant for centuries. Lyra nodded once, decisively. Let it be known that for this moment, Prince Kale shall stand beside me. Not as a servant, not as a subject, but as a guest worthy of attention. And let it also be known that those who oppose this shall answer to the consequences of failing to see opportunity in courage. A hush fell over the room. Some of the younger nobles exchanged looks of admiration, while the older council members fumed, their faces red with anger. Kale could feel the weight of centuries pressing down on him, yet at the same time he felt an exhilaration he had never known. He was not just a visitor. He was a symbol, a challenge to every ancient law, and perhaps the first human to be seen not as inferior, but as worthy. The rest of the day was a blur of ceremonial rituals and cautious diplomacy. Kale followed Lyra through the palace halls, each step measured and deliberate. Everywhere they went, whispers followed. Some Zythurians looked at him with suspicion, others with awe, and a few with something Kale could not quite name: hope. In the gardens, where crystalline fountains sparkled under the light of the twin suns, Kale finally allowed himself a moment of respite. Lyra walked beside him, her steps graceful, her presence commanding yet comforting. "You did not falter," she said softly. "I admit I was unsure of what you would do, but you stood firm. That is admirable." Kale smiled, a mixture of relief and pride washing over him. "I could not have done it alone," he said. "Your support, your willingness to see beyond the laws, it gave me courage." Lyra's gaze lingered on him, thoughtful. Perhaps that is what the Empire needs most: courage to see beyond fear, to embrace what we have ignored for too long. Perhaps humans are exactly what we have been missing. For a moment, the world seemed to quiet around them. Birds with crystalline feathers fluttered above, and the water of the fountains shimmered with every color of the sun. Kale felt a strange sense of destiny, as though his arrival in Lumara was not by chance but by necessity. He had crossed light years, faced the prejudices of an entire empire, and still, here he was, standing beside the princess, defying rules that had stood for thousands of years. But Kale also knew the path ahead would not be easy. The council would not forgive so easily. Ancient traditions had teeth, and there were those who would stop at nothing to maintain them. Yet he could not retreat. Humans had never been a people to surrender in the face of impossible odds, and he would not start now. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the gardens, Kale and Lyra continued their walk. They spoke of strategies, of alliances, and of the possibilities that awaited if they could change the hearts of those bound by fear. Each word, each plan strengthened their resolve. They were no longer simply prince and princess. They were partners in a vision that challenged the very foundations of the empire. Night fell, and the twin moons rose, casting a silver glow over the city. The palace stood silent, a fortress of power and tradition, yet within its walls a spark of defiance had been lit. Kale felt it, an ember of change that promised to grow into a fire bright enough to illuminate the entire galaxy. For the first time in his life, he realized that standing beside someone truly beside them could be more powerful than any army, more influential than any law. It was a simple truth, yet one that could reshape history. And so, as the city of Lumara slept under the watchful eyes of the stars, a human prince stood beside a Zythurian princess, defying every ancient law, and in that moment the impossible became real. The first step had been taken, and the journey had only just begun. The days that followed Kale's first stand beside Princess Lyra were filled with tension and quiet observation. Within the palace walls, whispers grew louder, and eyes followed their every move. Many nobles could not believe that the princess had allowed a human to break a law older than any living being among them. To them, it was sacrilege. To Kale, it was a chance to show what humanity could offer. He and Lyra spent hours walking through the palace corridors, discussing ideas that no Zythurian had dared speak aloud for centuries. Kale shared stories of Earth, tales of human innovation, courage, and survival. He spoke of planets reclaimed from desolation, of societies rebuilt from nothing, of conflicts solved through strategy and compassion rather than sheer force. Lyra listened, fascinated. Her people had relied on tradition for so long that the ingenuity of a human mind felt like a revelation. Your world is full of contradictions, Lyra said one evening as they gazed over the city from the palace balcony. You create beauty, yet you fight destruction. You build, yet you destroy. How do you survive such chaos? Kale smiled, his gaze fixed on the distant horizon. Perhaps it is because we do not give up. We are forced to adapt. Every challenge teaches us something, and every failure makes us stronger. Humans learn from mistakes in a way the galaxy has long forgotten. Lyra nodded slowly, absorbing every word. That is a quality we have lost, Kale. Zythurians are strong, yes, but we are rigid. We fear change more than we fear failure. Perhaps your kind has a gift we have ignored for too long. Despite these moments of quiet understanding, the council did not rest. News of Kale's presence had spread quickly, and every council member had an opinion. Some argued that the Empire's laws were sacred, and any human daring to defy them must be punished. Others, mostly younger nobles, observed Kale with a mixture of curiosity and admiration. His bravery had unsettled them, challenged their assumptions, and left them wondering if the Empire had been blinded by its own tradition. Kale and Lyra were careful. Every step they took was measured, every word calculated. They knew that even a single misstep could bring wrath upon them both, yet they refused to hide. They moved openly, showing that defiance need not be violent and that courage could be calm and reasoned. One afternoon, they walked through the palace gardens, a place of crystal fountains and exotic flora. The air was filled with the sweet scent of alien blossoms, their petals glimmering with iridescent colors. Kale knelt to observe one particular plant, its roots curling around a small pool of water. On Earth, we have similar plants, he said. They survive in harsh environments just like humans do. They bend rather than break, and they thrive when others think they cannot. Lyra crouched beside him, intrigued. It is remarkable. I see the connection you make. We have been rigid for centuries, like the old stone walls of the palace. Perhaps it is time to bend without breaking, to grow in ways we never imagined. As they spoke, Kale began to notice that some of the younger nobles were observing them quietly from the shadows. They did not intervene, but their interest was evident. Some whispered to one another, questioning the long-held prejudices against humans. Others simply watched, unsure of what to make of the strange partnership forming before their eyes. Later that evening, Kale and Lyra convened in a private chamber to discuss strategy. The council would not remain passive forever. Kale knew that their defiance would soon be tested, and they needed a plan that could protect both of them and show the council the value of humanity. We need to prove that humans are more than the council believes, Kale said. Not through words alone, but through action. Demonstrate strategy, intelligence, and loyalty. If we can show them that we bring strength and insight, perhaps their hearts will open. Lyra's eyes glimmered with determination. I will stand beside you, Kale. If we succeed, it will change the Empire. But if we fail, the consequences will be severe. Are you ready for that? Kale met her gaze, unwavering. I am. Humans do not back down from impossible odds, neither should you. The next day, they began small. They organized exercises in diplomacy, presenting scenarios in which humans could help the Empire overcome challenges. Kale suggested solutions for resource allocation, trade negotiations, and defensive strategy, ideas that no Zythurian had considered. The council, reluctantly observing, could not ignore the results. Each solution was practical, efficient, and creative. Kale's insights challenged centuries of thinking, forcing them to reconsider assumptions they had long accepted as truth. One council elder, a stern figure named Valrin, finally spoke. These strategies are impressive, human, but they do not erase the law. How dare you stand beside the princess, defying every rule? Kale replied calmly. I do not seek to erase your laws, Elder Valrin. I seek to strengthen them by showing that courage and intelligence can coexist with tradition. We can uphold the Empire's values while embracing change. Lyra supported him, her voice unwavering. Elder Valrin, it is time to see beyond fear. Kale's presence is not a threat, it is an opportunity. We can grow stronger by learning from those we once dismissed. Arguments erupted again, but a new perspective was taking root. Some nobles began to question whether rigid tradition had truly served the Empire well. Perhaps the laws that once protected them were now holding them back. Perhaps Kale and Lyra's partnership was a glimpse of a future they had never dared imagine. Outside the palace, the city itself seemed to react. Humans in Lumara, though few in number, began to notice Kale's presence. Some offered quiet gestures of respect, while others whispered tales of the human who stood beside the princess. Kale became a symbol, not of rebellion, but of possibility. He represented a future in which humans could be recognized for their courage, ingenuity, and loyalty. As the days passed, Kale and Lyra grew closer. They shared meals, walked through the gardens, and spent hours discussing the histories and philosophies of their respective worlds. Kale learned of Zythurian culture, of its grandeur and complexity, and of the fears that had kept its people bound to old rules. Lyra learned of human resilience, of their ability to adapt and thrive in conditions no Zythurian could endure. Each conversation strengthened their bond, not as prince and princess, but as partners in a mission larger than themselves. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the horizon, Kale and Lyra stood on a balcony overlooking the city. "Do you ever fear the council?" Kale asked, his voice quiet. Lyra shook her head. "I fear stagnation more than I fear punishment. If we let fear control us, the empire will decay. Standing beside you, Kale, is a choice I make for the future, not for comfort." Kale nodded. He understood completely. Courage was not the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. Together, they were taking a step that could reshape the empire, and neither of them intended to step back. Suddenly, a messenger arrived, bearing a sealed scroll from the council. Lyra opened it and read aloud. "By the order of the High Council, the presence of a human beside the princess must be reviewed. A formal evaluation will be conducted to determine the merit of this defiance." Kale and Lyra exchanged a glance. The challenge they had anticipated was arriving sooner than expected. Yet neither felt fear. Instead, they felt determination. The evaluation would be an opportunity to demonstrate the truth. Humans were capable of honor, strategy, and leadership. Preparations began immediately. Kale studied every aspect of the Zythurian systems, from military tactics to trade logistics. He worked tirelessly, creating proposals and simulations that could not be ignored. Lyra supported him at every step, guiding him through protocols and advising him on how to present his ideas. Together, they became a team, two minds united in purpose, facing the weight of centuries of tradition. In the palace corridors, whispers of their partnership spread further. Some nobles tried to undermine them, spreading rumors and questioning Kale's loyalty. Others quietly offered support, intrigued by the potential of change. The empire was divided, yet a subtle shift was taking place. Minds that had once been closed began to open, if only slightly, to the idea that humans could bring value beyond what tradition allowed. One afternoon, Kale and Lyra met in the gardens to finalize their presentation for the council. Sunlight danced across the fountains, casting shimmering reflections on their faces. Kale looked at Lyra, feeling a sense of shared purpose that went beyond politics or law. "Whatever happens," he said, "we have already changed something here. The council may not accept us immediately, but the seed is planted." Lyra smiled, a rare expression of warmth crossing her features. "Yes, Kale. And even if the council resists, we have begun a conversation that cannot be silenced. We are showing them that courage, intelligence, and integrity are not bound by species." The sun dipped below the horizon, and the city was bathed in a soft twilight glow. Kale felt the weight of the future pressing upon him, yet also a thrill of possibility. They were on the brink of something monumental, a shift that could redefine the empire and humanity's place within it. As night fell, they stood together in silence, watching the stars emerge. For the first time, Kale realized that standing beside the princess was not just an act of defiance. It was a promise that the future could be different, that courage could triumph over fear, and that humanity could rise to meet challenges once thought impossible. The evaluation would come, the council would judge them. But for now, Kale and Lyra shared a quiet understanding. They had begun something extraordinary, and nothing could take that away. And so, in the heart of Lumara, a human prince and a Zythurian princess continued their quiet revolution, defying expectations, breaking barriers, and lighting the first sparks of a future that had once seemed impossible. The council's decision came swiftly. Kale and Lyra were summoned to the Sky Citadel, a massive floating platform high above the capital, suspended in the air by magnetic fields and ancient technology. The Citadel was a place of judgment, where the Empire tested the most serious matters of law and loyalty. The council had declared that Kale's presence beside the princess would be evaluated through a formal trial. It was not a ceremony. It was a test, a challenge designed to measure skill, intelligence, and worthiness. Kale had anticipated this moment, yet the reality of standing before the entire council made his chest tighten. Hundreds of nobles, officials, and observers would watch every gesture, every word. Every action would be scrutinized, and a single mistake could undo everything he and Lyra had built. Yet he remained calm. Courage, he reminded himself, was not the absence of fear, it was acting despite it. Lyra walked beside him, her hand brushing briefly against his. There was no need for words. Together they had faced whispers, doubts, and scrutiny, and they had emerged stronger. Today they would face the Empire itself. The sky citadel shimmered under the light of the twin suns, its circular platform surrounded by transparent barriers that offered a breathtaking view of the city below. Kale stepped forward, aware that every eye in the chamber was on him. The council members were seated in a semicircle, their expressions a mixture of skepticism, curiosity, and in some cases faint admiration. The head of the council, Elder Valrin, rose, his robes flowing like dark clouds. "Prince Kale," he began, his voice echoing across the citadel. "You have dared to defy our laws, to stand beside the princess in violation of traditions that have bound this empire for millennia. Today, you will demonstrate your worth. You will show us whether humanity is capable of more than mere obedience." Kale bowed slightly, meeting Valrin's gaze with steady eyes. "I will do my best, Elder Valrin," he said. "Not for myself, but to show that courage and intelligence are not limited by species. Humans are capable of honor, loyalty, and wisdom. I intend to prove it." The first challenge was one of strategy. Holographic displays rose from the platform, depicting a simulated conflict. Zythurian forces defending a planet under attack from an alien fleet. Kale's task was to create a defense plan, balancing limited resources, troop placement, and technological advantages. The council expected hesitancy, mistakes, or reliance on brute force. Kale examined the simulation carefully. He noted the enemy's patterns, the weaknesses in the defense grid, and the environmental factors that could be exploited. Slowly, he laid out a strategy, combining Zythurian technology with human ingenuity. He suggested using the terrain to funnel the enemy fleet into traps, deploying drones in unexpected formations, and leveraging energy shields in innovative ways. The council watched, their expressions changing from doubt to surprise. Elder Valrin leaned forward, frowning. "Your approach is unconventional," he said, "yet it minimizes losses and maximizes efficiency. Explain your reasoning." Kale smiled slightly, grateful for the chance to speak. "In war, predictability is a weakness. Zythurians rely on strength and advanced technology, which is formidable, but predictable tactics can be countered. By using creative maneuvers, we can achieve victory while preserving our forces. Efficiency and adaptability are key." A murmur ran through the council. Kale's strategy had succeeded where many Zythurians might have failed. The first challenge had shown that human thinking could complement Zythurian power in ways previously unimagined. The second challenge tested diplomacy. Kale and Lyra were placed in a simulated negotiation with representatives of a neutral alien race. The aliens were stubborn, demanding, and quick to anger, conditions designed to frustrate any diplomat. Kale remained calm. He listened carefully, acknowledged their concerns, and proposed compromises that satisfied both sides. Lyra added her own knowledge of Zythurian priorities, creating a solution that balanced power, resources, and cultural respect. Together, they achieved an agreement in minutes, where the simulation had predicted days of stalemate. The council observed silently, some shifting uncomfortably in their seats. They could not deny the effectiveness of Kale's reasoning. A human had solved problems that seasoned Zythurian negotiators struggled with for cycles. The final challenge was one of morality and leadership. Kale and Lyra were presented with a scenario in which an epidemic threatened several colonies under the Empire's protection. Resources were limited, and the council expected Kale to make hard choices, sacrificing some to save others. Kale took a deep breath. He refused to treat the situation as a mere puzzle. Instead, he considered the lives at stake. He proposed a solution that maximized aid without abandoning any colony entirely. Reallocating supplies, utilizing transport drones for rapid delivery, and coordinating medical teams in new ways. His plan required precise timing, coordination, and trust in the people executing it. Lyra watched him closely, impressed by the compassion underlying his strategy. Kale's approach did not sacrifice principle for efficiency. It balanced practicality with empathy, a combination the Council had rarely seen in such trials. When he finished, Elder Valrin rose slowly, his expression unreadable. "Prince Kale," he said, his voice measured, "you have exceeded our expectations. Not only have you demonstrated intelligence and strategy, but also wisdom and morality. You have shown that humans can be more than subjects. They can be partners, advisors, and leaders." A ripple of astonishment moved through the chamber. Some council members shifted uncomfortably, unwilling to admit their surprise. Others exchanged glances, silently acknowledging the truth. The Empire had long believed that humans were inferior, incapable of understanding complex governance or leading with honor. Kale had proven every assumption wrong. Lyra stepped forward, standing beside him. "This trial shows not only Kale's capabilities but also the potential of humanity. The laws that once bound us may need reconsideration. Fear of change should not prevent us from embracing opportunity." A young noble whispered to another, "Perhaps we have underestimated them for too long." Elder Valrin studied Kale and Lyra for a long moment, the weight of centuries pressing on his shoulders. Finally, he spoke. "By the Council's judgment, Prince Kale shall retain his position beside the princess. His presence is now sanctioned, not as a violation, but as a testament to what courage, intelligence, and integrity can achieve." The chamber erupted in whispers, some of awe, some of protest. Kale felt a rush of relief and triumph, yet he remained composed. This was not the end. It was a beginning. The Empire had acknowledged the potential of humanity, but the work of change had only just begun. After the trial, Kale and Lyra walked through the corridors of the Citadel, their steps light with quiet victory. The view from above the city was breathtaking. Lights shimmered below, casting reflections on the clouds, and the twin moons began to rise. Kale felt a sense of possibility he had never known. Humans had been dismissed for centuries, yet here in the heart of the Empire they had shown their worth. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes reflecting both pride and determination. "This is only the beginning," she said softly. "The Council has recognized your worth, Kale, but there is still much to do. Prejudice dies slowly, even when truth stands before it." Kale nodded. "I understand, but we have made the first step. One step at a time, we can show that humans are not only capable but essential. We can inspire change, not through force, but through example." Their partnership grew stronger with each day. Nobles who had once looked down on humans began to approach Kale with questions, curious about his methods and ideas. Even some of the council elders, initially resistant, found themselves intrigued by his insights. Kale and Lyra had become symbols of possibility, a reminder that courage, intelligence, and morality could overcome prejudice. Outside the palace, the citizens of Lumara noticed the change. Humans in the city, previously marginalized, were now seen with new eyes. Whispers of Kale's triumph spread through the streets, inspiring hope and curiosity. Humans began to participate more openly in civic affairs, offering ideas and solutions that had long been ignored. The Empire was awakening to a new reality, one in which collaboration between species could lead to greater strength and innovation. In the gardens of the palace, Kale and Lyra often met in quiet moments, discussing strategy, philosophy, and the future. Kale shared more stories of Earth, emphasizing human resilience and creativity. Lyra shared the history of the Zythurian Empire, its triumphs, and its blind spots. Together, they envisioned a future where humans and Zythurians could work side by side, building an empire stronger than any one species could achieve alone. One evening, as the sun set and the twin moons rose, casting silver light across the gardens, Kale and Lyra stood side by side, gazing at the stars. "Do you think they will ever truly accept humans?" Kale asked quietly. Lyra smiled, her gaze steady. "Perhaps not all at once. But acceptance begins with understanding. And you have given them understanding, Kale. That is more than many could achieve in a lifetime." Kale felt a warmth in his chest, a quiet satisfaction. He had faced centuries of prejudice, defied ancient laws, and stood beside a princess who believed in him. Yet he knew the journey was far from over. Change was slow, and many would resist. But for the first time, he could see a path forward, a way for humans to claim their place in the galaxy not as subordinates, but as equals. And so, as the city slept beneath the twin moons, Kale and Lyra prepared for the future. The trial had ended, but their mission continued. Together, they would show the Empire that courage, intelligence, and morality were not bound by species. They would prove that humans could inspire, lead, and transform. For Kale, standing beside Lyra was no longer just an act of defiance. It was a promise to humanity, to the Empire, and to the stars. And in that promise lay the hope of a new dawn, a future where boundaries could be broken, and possibilities could shine brighter than any law, tradition, or fear. The ruling from the Sky Citadel had changed everything, yet nothing felt settled. Kale and Lyra walked through the palace halls with quiet purpose, aware that the recognition by the council was only the beginning. Change was never instant, and centuries of prejudice could not vanish overnight. But the seed of transformation had been planted, and it was growing faster than either of them had expected. Everywhere they went, whispers followed. Humans in the city now held their heads a little higher, inspired by Kale's courage. Zythurian nobles, some curious and some reluctant, observed him closely. Some still questioned the wisdom of allowing a human to stand beside the princess, but many could no longer ignore the truth. Kale had proven himself beyond doubt. Lyra led him to a private chamber where they could speak freely. "The council's decision was historic," she said, her voice steady. "But history is not enough. We need action. The Empire will watch us closely, and we must guide them, show them that humans can strengthen this world, not weaken it." Kale nodded. "I understand. Words have their power, but action is stronger. We need to create opportunities for humans to contribute, to show the Empire their value through real deeds, not just trials." They began by reorganizing the palace administration. Kale suggested reforms that were logical, efficient, and fair. Human advisors and specialists were given roles in planning, communication, and logistics. Initially, some Zythurians resisted, clinging to tradition, but the results spoke louder than complaints. Tasks were completed faster, decisions were better informed, and crises that had once taken cycles to resolve were solved in days. Lyra observed these changes closely. She had always believed in the potential of cooperation, but seeing humans and Zythurians work side by side, each learning from the other, was inspiring. "You were right, Kale," she admitted one afternoon as they watched a team of humans and Zythurians organize a city-wide supply chain. "Courage and intelligence are not limited to one species. Humans bring something we have long overlooked." Kale smiled. "It's not about being better than Zythurians. It's about complementing each other. We all have strengths. Together we can be stronger than any law or tradition ever imagined." Yet even as progress unfolded, challenges remained. Some elders of the council continued to resist, arguing that allowing humans such influence would weaken the Empire. They spread rumors, questioned Kale's loyalty, and warned Lyra that her decisions were reckless. The whispers threatened to undermine the work they had accomplished, but Kale and Lyra remained steadfast. To address the dissent, they organized forums where humans and Zythurians could share knowledge openly. Kale demonstrated engineering solutions, diplomatic strategies, and resource management techniques. Lyra emphasized ethical governance and fairness. Slowly, minds began to change. Nobles who had once doubted humans now asked questions, sought advice, and even began to collaborate on new initiatives. One day, Kale was called to speak before a gathering of the council and prominent citizens. The chamber was filled with anticipation. Some doubted him, others watched with curiosity, and a few were openly supportive. Kale took a deep breath and began to speak, carefully choosing his words. "Esteemed council members, citizens of the Empire," he began, "we stand at a crossroads. For centuries, humans were dismissed as incapable of contributing to this great empire. I have shown, through trials and action, that this is not true, but proof alone is not enough. Trust is built through continued effort, through cooperation, and through understanding. Humans are here not to replace Zythurians, but to stand beside them, to work together, and to create a future stronger than any tradition alone could provide." His words were simple, yet they carried power. The council members listened quietly, some frowning, others nodding. The message was clear. Humans were capable, not inferior. The Empire had much to gain by embracing them fully. Lyra stood beside him, silently reinforcing his message. Her presence was a reminder that leadership could be brave, compassionate, and open to change. Together, they embodied a new vision for the Empire, one of collaboration, respect, and growth. Over the following weeks, Kale and Lyra implemented practical programs to integrate humans into key aspects of the Empire. Humans were invited to participate in scientific research, technological development, and strategic planning. They contributed to improving defenses, streamlining communication networks, and enhancing trade agreements. The results were undeniable. Efficiency increased, morale improved, and the Empire began to thrive in ways it had not experienced for centuries. Even citizens who had been skeptical began to take notice. Humans were no longer outsiders, they were partners. Stories of Kale's courage and intelligence spread throughout the cities and colonies. Children asked questions about him, inspired to believe that their species, too, could achieve greatness. Humans who had once lived quietly, unseen, now stepped forward to contribute their skills and ideas. Despite the progress, Kale and Lyra knew the work was far from over. Prejudice, though weakened, still lingered. Some nobles and citizens clung to the old laws, fearful of change. Others questioned whether humans could truly be trusted with responsibility. Kale understood that lasting change required patience, persistence, and constant demonstration of integrity. One evening, Kale and Lyra walked through the gardens, reflecting on how far they had come. "Do you ever think about the future?" Kale asked, his gaze on the shimmering fountains. "Not just our immediate work, but centuries from now," Lyra nodded. "I do. I see a time when humans and Xythurians work together naturally without fear or suspicion. When innovation and courage are celebrated regardless of species, it will take time, but the first steps have been taken, thanks to you." Kale felt a surge of pride, tempered by humility. "It has been a partnership, Lyra. Your willingness to see beyond law and tradition made all the difference. Humans alone could not have achieved this." Lyra smiled, her eyes reflecting the twin moons above. "Then we continue together. The Empire has recognized the potential of change. Now we must ensure it is realized, and that the future we imagine becomes reality." As they walked, they encountered groups of young nobles and citizens. Many approached them with questions, eager to learn, to contribute, and to be part of the new era. Kale and Lyra answered patiently, encouraging dialogue, inspiring confidence, and demonstrating that leadership was not about power alone. It was about understanding, collaboration, and vision. In the weeks that followed, the Empire began to transform. Trade routes became more efficient, colonies received better resources, and diplomatic relations with neighboring civilizations improved. Humans contributed innovative ideas, and Xythurians, in turn, shared their knowledge and experience. Together, they formed a stronger, more adaptive society. Even the council, once wary and rigid, began to see the benefits of this new approach. Some elders softened their stance, admitting that humans had proven their worth. Others remained skeptical but could not deny the tangible improvements. The Empire was changing, and resistance, while present, was no longer dominant. Kale and Lyra continued to lead by example. They traveled to distant colonies, worked alongside humans and Xythurians, and demonstrated that equality and cooperation could bring prosperity. Their presence inspired hope, courage, and ambition. The Empire's citizens began to believe that their own efforts, regardless of species, could make a difference. One evening, as the twin moons reflected in the crystal waters of the palace fountains, Kale stood beside Lyra on the balcony. "We've come far," he said quietly. "But there is still so much to do. Some will resist, some will doubt, but if we continue, we can create something lasting, something that will endure for generations." Lyra nodded, her hand brushing against his. "Yes, Kale, the Empire will not change overnight. But every mind we open, every heart we inspire, brings us closer. Humans and Xythurians together can shape a future stronger than any law or tradition alone." Kale looked at the horizon, where the first light of dawn touched the distant mountains. "It is a new beginning," he said softly, "a future where courage, intelligence, and integrity are valued above fear and prejudice." Lyra smiled. "And together we will make it real." From that day forward, Kale and Lyra continued their work, side by side, transforming the Empire not through force, but through example. They proved that humans could inspire change, contribute to greatness, and stand equally beside the Xythurians. The old laws, once rigid and unforgiving, began to evolve, and the Empire slowly embraced a vision of unity, cooperation, and shared destiny. Stories of Kale's courage spread across the galaxy. Humans, once dismissed as weak and inferior, now held a place of honor. They participated in governance, science, and strategy, shaping the future alongside the Zythurians. And wherever Kale went, he carried the message that courage and integrity could overcome fear, that intelligence and empathy could bridge worlds, and that humanity's potential was limitless when given the chance. In the palace gardens, under the light of the twin moons, Kale and Lyra stood together, gazing at the stars. They had defied ancient laws, faced prejudice, and transformed an empire. Yet their journey was ongoing, for change was never complete. But in that moment, they knew that the impossible had become possible, that humans and Zythurians could work together, and that the future held endless promise. And so the Empire entered a new dawn, guided by courage, vision, and the undeniable truth that humans could not only stand beside the princess, but help lead the galaxy toward a brighter, united future. A human prince stood beside the princess, defying every ancient law,